So hello, Mathieu. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you today. So maybe you want to introduce yourself to begin with?
Thank you, Olivier. Yes, so as you can probably see, I'm a Buddhist monk, but my first vocation was to be a scientist, molecular geneticist. I worked for many years, several years in the Pasteur Institute with François Jacob and Jacques Monod to distinguish the two scientists who's quite actual now, who discovered the RNA messenger, the famous one. And then in the meantime, I had read a lot about spirituality. And I decided when I was 20, before I entered Pasteur Institute, to go to the Himalayas. The reason is that I grew up in an intellectual family in France. My father, Jean-François Revel, was a philosopher. My mother is an artist. I had an uncle who was an explorer. I met many great musicians, of course, scientists through my sort of studies and the work. But I was quite, how do you say, puzzled by the fact that there was no obvious correlation between a skill, like to be a great chess player, like Bobby Fischer, and be a good human being. So it was puzzling for a young person who looks for a role model in life, sense of direction. You know, I wanted to play chess like Bobby Fischer, but not be Bobby Fischer. So that was the problem, lack of coherence. So when I saw a documentary on all the great Tibetan master, men and women who had fled the invasion of Tibet on the Indian side of the Himalayas, I thought there were 20 Socrates, 20 Saint Francis of Assisi, or great sages alive now. And I thought, okay, I'm going there to see what's up, what's there. So I was, when I met those great teachers, sages, I felt that there was a real coherence. The messenger was the message. And even though I didn't know much about Buddhism, I felt that if I could become a little bit like them, not just know what they knew, that would be a good use of my life. So to make a long story short, after 6 years at doing a PhD, I decided to do my postdoc in the Himalayas for 50 years. And here I am, happily having done so and continued on my way. So, and then, few things happened. I happened to write a book with my father, the French philosopher Jean-François Revel, so last 20 years ago. And that was either the end of my quietness or the beginning of my trouble or the beginning of an opportunity, because since then, I've been asked to come here and there, and I left, I went round quite a lot for 20 years. And now I decided at 76 now soon, it's time to slow down and go back to my heritage. So in short, this is half a century in the Himalayas.
Thank you so much. I've also done a PhD in molecular genetics, so I empathize with this. I also played a lot of chess, and I'm just reading your book with your father, which is, okay. I recommend as much as all your other books that I had the pleasure to read, especially the one on altruism, because I'm quite interested in the fact that being both a monk, a Buddhist monk, but also a scientist, you were able to discuss altruism, integrating both what the science has to say about this and what the spirituality, especially the Tibetan spirituality, has to say about this. And I think that indeed this ability to bring together West and East, or spirituality and science, I think is something that we deeply need.
Well, yes, because you see, first, altruism, of course, is a state of mind. At the same time, it's a concept that in my mind, after having gone around many, many disciplines, from the science of evolution to psychology to solidarity, economy, and all these things, it seems that it's the only pragmatic concept that can help us resolve the challenges of the 21st century. And if I may say it in a nutshell, why? You see, we have a very we have a hard time reconciling three timescale, the needs of three timescale. There is the immediate need of a mother in Africa to feed their kids, or a mother in Afghanistan right now to feed their kids the next week. So that cannot wait. This is not about the environment or in century. This is also the fast, high-speed investment that with millions of transactions within a fraction of a second. So this is the super short term. Then, you know, the companies look at the balance sheet at the end of the month, end of the year. Then there's the midterm. That's a generation, a career, a family, a lifetime. And that, I think for that, we need to thrive in life. People have to have the chance to fulfill their basic aspiration. Otherwise, if a country is the most powerful and the richest and everyone is unhappy, what's the point? So that's the need for people to have a meaningful life, a satisfactory life. And that's a kind of basic right in a way. Then there's a new challenge because, you know, as you know, about 12,000 years ago only, we were about 1 to 5 million human beings on Earth. So no big deal, even though we managed to eliminate all the big species, but basically it's a limited impact. Now we're 7 billion. And then our power has grown immensely. So now we became the main force to shape the future of the planet and the biosphere. So it happened over a century or so with the great acceleration. And so now we are really the one who decide the fate of future generations. So this is a new challenge that they will say you knew and you did nothing. So now selfishness will not do the job. You know, if you just think of yourself, there will be a selfish economy and the people will be at the service of the economy. We have seen the insane and indecent enrichment of all the biggest fortune in the world during the pandemic. What does that mean? Everything goes to the top. Now about 8 people own as much as the 25% poorest of the humanity. This is just, the system is just dysfunctional. So selfishness will not do the job. If you don't care for future generation, then it will not happen. You know, my favorite Marxist is Groucho Marx. He said, why should I care for future generation? What did they do for me? But I heard an American billionaire saying the same thing seriously. He said, oh, why? I find absurd to change my behavior now for something happened in 100 years. You know, okay, never mind. So now you need a concept to put around the same table, social workers who care for poverty in the midst of plenty, social justice, government people, you know, deciders, leaders of in the economy and everything, and scientists who know what should be done for the environment, but feel very depressed that nobody's really paying attention, and to sit around the same table, assuming that they want to build a better world. Now they need a common concept. So having more consideration for others, which is altruism, is the only concept that can reconcile the short, the midterm, and the long term. A more just economy, the voice of care, then the favor people, you know, flourishing in life, in the workplace, the equality between men and women, social justice, and everything, and caring genuinely for future generations. So in that case, that's why altruism is so important. Now, why spirituality? No, you need to cultivate that. We have the potential for it. And neuroscience shows that if you train your mind, your brain changes. And contemplative science shows that if you train your mind, you change. So we have the potential for it at different levels. We need to enhance it. We need more cooperation, more solidarity. And there are studies in evolution that if altruistic cooperate together, they have a group advantage over a bunch of selfish people who kick each other's leg all the time. So there's a long, interesting discussion. That's why I spent 5 years researching that subject in the book called Altruism, which has, I don't know, over 1,000 scientific and philosophical references to make a case. That's not a luxury, it's absolute need. So sorry for taking so long, but I think this is a very important point.
It is absolutely. We completely agree. You know, the motto of the Learning Planet Festival, for which we are inviting you to give us this amazing introduction, is learning to care for oneself, others, and the planet. So I think that, you know, the 3 time scale we were discussing are also resonating with these 3 levels of care that we need to be able to do: the self, the others, and the planet. And the planet includes, you know, all the human beings, but also all the animals and all the living beings on this planet. And also, if we care for the planet, then we care for the long term, because and therefore for the next generations. So we are completely aligned. I worked also on bacterial cooperation, information exchange, and actually what we could show experimentally is that there is conditions where you can simultaneously select for cooperation and information exchange. So altruism and increased ability to communicate, to cooperate better, can co-evolve even in a bacterial system. So a fortiori in a system where we have the ability to become aware, to become conscious about the collective needs, and certainly the planetary needs are becoming paramount. And my gut feeling is that if I look at ancient Greece, for instance, they've invented an amazing package: democracy, philosophy, science, education, debate, the agora, and many other things, including arts and so on. But and that package has been reinvented a few years later, a few centuries later, during the Enlightenment. The Greek did it at the city scale, inventing the concept of citizenship, and the nations have reinvented it during the Enlightenment, so we became citizens of nations. But today, none of us is a true citizen of the world. So how could we reinvent the Athenian package and the Enlightenment package in the digital age, in this planetary age, in this Anthropocene period where we are facing all the challenges that you've just very well summarized? And can we use new technologies? Because the Greek used writing, the Enlightenment used printing. Now we have digital technology, but we also have to be somewhat critical about the Enlightenment and the Greek democracy, because they were not very inclusive. Typically, women were not part of the citizens. Children were not part of the citizens. Slaves were even less part of the decision-making processes. And so, can we reinvent the Enlightenment in this planetary age, making it more inclusive, more ecological, and so that instead of using knowledge to compete with one another, to dominate oneself, others, and the environment and the resources, so that we can learn to care for oneself, other, and the planet, while cooperating and developing our altruism at all scale, because doing it at the family level is not that easy, but we've been somewhat selected for it. Doing it at the nation has been a long historical process, but doing it at the planetary level is still to be invented. How would you do it?
Well, first of all, when you say taking care of others and taking care of oneself, this is really the wisdom that comes out of studying the effect of selfishness and altruism. Me all day long. We might think it's easier to build up our own happiness in our little bubble of selfishness because, okay, I have nothing against others' happiness, but it's not my job. So I build my happiness in the little bubble. But that doesn't work. That assumes that we are independent entities, and we could do so. It simply doesn't work because we are not autonomous, independent entities. So it's bound to fail. On top of that, it's a very unpleasant state of mind. Me all day long. You make your life miserable and you make everyone's life miserable. So it's a lose-lose situation. Now we know that benevolence, kindness, generosity, tenderness, altruistic love, all that, compassion, for oneself is also the most wholesome state of mind. Neuroscience and psychology have shown that this is among what we call positive affect. This is the one that comes with the widest range of other positive emotions and mental state. So it's a kind of the supreme emotion, this altruistic love. And on top of that, of course, others will perceive it well because you are well-intentioned towards others. So it becomes a win-win situation, the twofold accomplishment of others' good and your own good as well. They go hand in hand. So one is a lose-lose, one is a win-win situation. Now to go on a global, that's for the subjective feeling of that. And I think Romain Rolland summarized it very well. He said, if selfish happiness is the only goal of your life will soon be goalless. It doesn't work. Now, on the global level, what you say is basically some modern philosopher are sort of rediscovering the concept of interdependence as if it was something, wow, very new. It's very strange because at least in the East, this has been one of the most central tenets, say, of Buddhist philosophy, interdependence of all sentient beings and the inanimate world. We are totally interdependent. And interdependence also leads to the concept of non-violence. And because if our happiness and suffering are intimately linked, then, as the Dalai Lama said, it's non-violence against human beings, non-violence against other species, and non-violence against the environment. That's the only way to take into account this interdependence, because we're all in the same boat. Everything is connected. So if we want to address the challenges of the environment, of course, we cannot exclude the 8 million other species who are basically our co-citizens in this world, and they are not here as instruments for our so-called needs, no more than the whole planet is here as an instrument for us to exploit. And we know very well that now by August or soon July, we have exhausted every year the renewable part of the Earth's resources. And we know very well that we're still going head on to the 6th major extinction of species, after the last one being that of the dinosaur, and the first one that is provoked by one particular super predator that we have. So this need to understand interdependence, need to the notion of having more consideration for human beings, for social justice, for the condition of women, for other species who are sentient beings. Now, they are not things, they are sentient beings, they have emotion. Evolution, as you know, is very economical. If we have emotion, if we have consciousness, it's not came out of the blue. That millions of year process has also expressed itself in different forms in other species. So there's no quantum leap, although we are extremely intelligent, but everyone has skills that is needed to survive. So in one way, understanding the concept of interdependence is really the way to go about, I think, dealing with the issues and the challenges of our times.
I love it, Matthieu. It's funny because I'm just writing this book called AC Nu that is going to come out on the 12th of January, and there is an English version called Game Changing. And in the book, I talk about a declaration of interdependence, because the Enlightenment was built around Declaration of Independence in America and in other places. What would be a declaration of interdependence? And in a way, maybe I can ask you, resonating with this book, what would be your AC Nu if you were to complete that sentence? Or in English, if you were to change the game, what would be the part of the game you would want to see change in order to have the collective to understand what you are describing? So, what it is that we could do collectively that we could not do alone, what it is that we should change in the rule of the games, because the current games that we are playing are hyper-competitive games and very destructive games. So, what would be new games we could be playing that would be enabling us to collectively define our common future, and maybe invite every one of us to answer, what if we, and then, what would you add to that sentence? How would you complete it?
Well, first of all, as you probably know, there is a declaration of interdependence already. I think I signed it some time ago. So what I would say, and this is not me by no means, but I have collected sentences going from Bertrand Russell to Kofi Annan to anyone, saying that cooperation is our only hope. And then it actually based on very solid science of evolution. Now, we always say struggle for life, competition, the survival of the fittest. Well, in a way, yes, but we can, struggle for life together, not against each other. And now there are many interesting recent studies. E.O. Wilson, who just passed away, Martin Novak at Harvard, wrote a book called Super Cooperator. Actually, they have shown very convincingly that, yes, of course, competition exists. We know that. but that throughout evolution, cooperation, starting with cells assembling to do a multicellular organism, all the way to social animals like we are, the competition, the cooperation has been the most important factor, creative factor, to go further and further up in the complexity of evolution, not competition. It exists, but cooperation has been so much more creative and important in shaping evolution. And then if we would think that if natural selection would select one trait in human society now, today, for survival, it would be cooperation. Because now, I mean, as Martin Luther King said, we came in different vessels and we're all in the same boat. So the only way to survive is to cooperate, not to sort of fight against each other, to cooperate for all the major issues. And we see, you know, like basically COP26 was more or less a failure because, I mean, most of those declarations will not be put in place. Just take the example, they say we have to reduce methane. Wow, a resolution, that seems very neat. But at the same time, European Commission said we should increase meat consumption for pleasing the meat industrial farming. So this is totally contradictory. The main emanation of methane that we can control comes from industrial farming. You know, the permafrost that release methane, we hard to control unless we stop the global warming. But we could very easily decrease methane that is 10 to 20 times more active in greenhouse gas effect by curving down meat consumption. It's not just because I'm vegetarian, it's just a basic ecological reason. It's also an ethical one because we evaluate the number of Homo sapiens that ever lived on Earth to about 120 billion for the very reason that, again, 10,000 years ago, probably we were 5 million. So that's the number of other species that we kill every 2 months, again and again, for our supposed to be needs, which are not. So this is totally unbalanced, this is totally unethical, and this is totally against preserving the environment. So for all those reasons, the taking in account interdependence and going toward more cooperation and benevolence, consideration of others, would it be other species, would it be the state of women, would it be the state of future generation? Because they will be there. They will say, you knew, you didn't do anything. So of course they are not there, but to blame us now, but they will certainly do so. So that's quite clear. And that's where I think the only hope for young people is to cooperate and to have more consideration for each other on the global level.
Thank you so much for this very clear point. One of the question of, how should we give a voice to the young people? How can we empower them? How can we make sure that they learn to cooperate rather than learn to compete? There is many ways I'm sure you can think of. There is one crazy proposal I try to make in this book because, as you know, the last non-citizen in the world among human beings are the children. That's very weird. Why aren't the children citizen? There is an interesting lawyer that specialist of children's rights that listed all the reasons why children cannot vote. They are not well educated, they don't understand the complexity of the issues, they are influenceable, and so on. And when he states this, the next sentence is, this is the very reason why women could not vote, or why poor people could not vote, or why the civic rights were denied to African Americans in the US, for instance. And so those reasons should be challenged. So then you can ask yourself, what is the age, the youngest age at which one should vote? And then, it's, for my mother, it was 21, then it became 18. Some people discuss 16. Why not at birth? So clearly at birth, you could not vote directly, but your parents could be voting for you until the age where you feel that you can make a difference and you can choose for yourself who you want to vote for. And it would be interesting to see what young parents would do when they have two ballots, theirs and their children.
Yes.
Would they vote exactly the same way? Maybe, maybe not. It will be an interesting discussion within themselves to begin with, and progressively with their child as the child grows. And so that's, and plus, it will change the demography of voters. As you know, the demography of voters is more balanced towards people of your generation, which, if everyone was like you, I guess it would be fine, but I'm not sure everyone is having the interest of the next generations into account, like the billionaire you mentioned. And so that's an open question. So, in more generally, how would you give youth a place in our world?
Well, first of all, the argument that, they are not mature enough. When you see some of the young activists like Greta Thunberg and others, you think they have little more brain than some heads of states, those of Brazil and recently of the US. So, well, I think certainly, from at least teenage, 13, 14, children have. Now, before that, it's very interesting idea that parents vote for them. And first, it seems a bit silly, just giving more votes to those who have many kids. But I remember a story I heard on the BBC of a head of a major company that was high, what you call externalities. That means the activities of the company had very negative long-term impact on the environment. And so one day, his daughter, who is 12, came back from school and said, "Daddy, I was told that you are one of the person who is wrecking the planet in which I was going to live." He was so shocked. That's one of the factor that made him decide that they will not just for the yearly sort of fascicule that you distribute to show that we are becoming green and all this rubbish, greenwashing, but genuinely changing some things in his corporation. Because he said he realized that his daughter, his very daughter, is going to blaming like anything in 20 years. So in that sense, I think it's a very interesting idea that it will make, okay, if I vote for my children, what they would like the world to be in 40 years. And that will make you think twice, I believe. And when you see that the last European elections, all the majority of people say below 27, the majority voted for the Green Party, even though they are pretty not very efficacious these days. But that shows that certainly the balance will change. And that's what we need. Otherwise, nobody can take decisions. I mean, basically, there should be presidents that are elected for, I don't know, 5 years or so, and can never be re-elected. So they can take very stark decisions that are absolutely needed without caring for opinion polls. So they would have the guts to take the right decision. Because now, as Churchill said, a head of state look at future generation, a politician at next election. So that's what paralyzes everything about the environment. They always say, okay, in 50 years, we'll stop coal. Like, and Modi said there will be coal-free in 2070. The world would be in a complete wreck at that time. So it's like passing the baby to next head of state and never do anything, basically. So decision should be short-term about the environment. And for that, we need people who have guts. And I think young people are more likely to elect such people.
Yeah, we completely agree. In a way, my favorite what if we is what if we empower the next generations to become the first global citizens? Because I don't see how we can have a democratic solution to our planetary issues unless we reinvent the Enlightenment and co-create a sort of fractal democracy. Multi-scale democracy from the very, very local all the way to the regional, national, European, in our case, and planetary. Because unless we do this, we'll never get a democratic solution to the most complex issues. And the question of reinventing democracy in the digital age is an open question. it's not very clear how we can do it, but it was not very clear how the Greek would invent democracy or how the Enlightenment had to solve this question. I think with the progress in social science, in basic science, in brain science, and in political science and social science, we can probably invent new things, especially if we are able to co-design them with the next generations, including co-design their own learning. Because if you look at schools and university, they've been designed, long time ago by older people, typically white males, for white males, and they were not so much thought of in a way that would be as inclusive as it should be. So if we were to redesign the learning experience to make sure that the young people have their interests heard, how would you do it? How would you give them a voice? And can this start within the family, within the classroom, within the local place? And we've seen Greta and others doing it on the global space, but the social networks are fantastic places for them to have a voice. But in the same time, they were not designed for this. They were designed to maximize the revenue of advertisement and manipulation. So how would we redesign both the learning environments, both at the school level, but also the digital learning ecosystems that we have built so far?
Well, you see, first about governance, of course, ideally, things like the UN, the WHO, and the COP meetings should have more power. They should have binding resolutions. Now, it has been somehow achieved at the European level because, European laws, even French people don't like it sometimes. They have to do it because, so you could imagine that for major issues like the environment, there would be world laws and so forth. About children, I just want to give one example that could be food for thought. In Rajasthan, in India, a friend of mine called Bunker Roy, who founded the Barefoot College, he started also the Children's Parliament. So those are kids, and mostly girls, in fact, from villages, who actually deliberate. They meet quite often, at least once a week for several hours, and they discuss the issues that happen in the village, including difficult ones, sometimes abuse and all kinds of things. And the parents sometimes are allowed to come and watch, but they cannot intervene. So actually, they discuss very seriously. They bring out proposals, and somehow the parents have been taking them seriously because they were real issues and they really care for it, and they were quite impressed by how genuine and forthright those children were. And just to give an anecdote of the kind of empowerment that it brings to those kids, once some of those children from Rajasthan, the one who was the head of the Children's Parliament, she was invited of the World Children Parliament or something like that in Sweden. And she met the Queen of Sweden, and she was, I think, 13 or 14. So the Queen of Sweden looked at this girl and she said, "Oh, you look quite, quite grounded and, assured of yourself for your age." And the little girl said, "Your Majesty, I'm the Prime Minister," because she was the Prime Minister of the Children's Parliament. So she was really feeling empowered and confident. And they were actually deciding on quite a few matters that the villagers accepted. So I think this kind of initiative can really empower children. And then, of course, those children would be quite mature to vote because they see what's needed for them, for aspects of life that parents may not really clearly see, about education, about the way children are treated, about the way girls are treated. So, that's out of the experience. And this very often we are surprised how mature they can be in expressing their needs and their aspirations.
Yeah, I fully agree. I recently discussed with 9-year-old children that I just created a MOOC on, how to take care of the climate. Okay. And they were saying, the adults told us to be wise, to be des enfants sages, but are all adults wise? They were questioning. And then I asked them, at what age do you think you would want to vote? and they say 7, and they were 9. Okay, so they say, 2 years ago already, we would have liked to vote. So it's very interesting. I think it's Condorcet was very nicely saying during the French Revolution that education, science, and democracy have to co-evolve. And when we see that, someone like Greta and many other young people are able to read the IPCC scientific reports on climate change, and they are able to voice their concerns, clearly they've understood Condorcet without necessarily having reading it. But, and I think that indeed, if we were to, as I think we should, reinvent this democracy at all scale, including the planetary scale, doing it with the younger ones would be the only way to do it that is truly efficient. And I don't know if you have read that report of WHO, UNICEF, published in the Lancet exactly 2 years ago. And they were saying that children's health is at risk. Their life expectancy is going to go down compared to our generation when it was up and up every generation. And that's because of climate change, pollution in cities, because of obesity, because of addictions, and because of the fact that they are being manipulated by artificial intelligence that is targeting ads to their weakest points, manipulating their emotions, sometimes their darkest emotions, to make them addicted to products like over sweet or over salted or over fat food, or porn or video games, or all sorts of social networks and so on that have been designed to become addictive. And as you know, because you have enough biological training for this, dopamine network are being hacked, and so our attention is being manipulated. And so how can we? And so the WHO UNICEF Lancet report, which was written by the President Helen Clark, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, as you know, is saying basically we have to redesign the Sustainable Developmental Goals in the light of children's rights, and we have to redesign the children's rights in the light of the Sustainable Developmental Goals. And we have to empower the young generations and to work with all those that care for their children, all those that care for children at large. There was this song in the 80s where I think Sting was saying, Russians love their children too. And so, this rich CEO loves his daughter as well. Okay, I mean, everyone wants the best for their children. And if the interests of the children are at risk, maybe, if you look at the deepest reason for altruism, genetically speaking, was the coevolution, because we are born vulnerable and we have to care for the youngest ones because otherwise there will be no next generation. So, this is in our best interest to care for the next generation. And so that's probably the reason why, altruism and cooperation have evolved genetically, not only in our species, but in many others. And so can we play with this? Can we start designing sort of, I don't know if it's a movement of all those that care for their children and for the young generations and the next generations and their grandchildren and so on. So can we collectively create a dynamic that can go beyond the selfish interest of a few companies that make a lot of money, damaging not only the environment, but also the children's health? At least that's what this report tells us.
Well, a few years ago, it was just a normal advertisement, in the TV and posters. And in Sweden, they say, we should be no advertisement for targeted to children. At the same time, when I was studying the altruism book, I found something about advertisement for children in the US. And there was a report from a fizzy drink company who said that if you hook them at a young age, you get them for life. So terrible. That would be relatively easy to deal with, advertisement in the TV, radio, and in the subways and all that. The problem now is that age is gone. Now we are totally the tsunami of the digital age. Unfortunately, now the epidemics is growing, not out of control. And we are totally, as you said, targeted and manipulated by algorithms. So the moment we lack something, to give you an example, I have a friend who is a photographer who taught me photography 50 years ago. He called me Moula Gaufre. I don't know how you say that in English. It's like to make pancakes. It's a funny name in Tintin. So in an email, I signed Moula Gaufre, which is like pancake. And then for 15 days, I was bombarded by advertisement to buy pancakes. Even I wanted to buy a train ticket. There was advertisement for pancakes all over the place. So basically, you know, and I'm not a big user of screens except for working, but not for going all over the place. I don't have an Instagram, Facebook, although there's some in my name because of the humanitarian project that I take care for, but I'm not using it myself. So, but I know very well, I've been discussing recently with Bruno Patino, who's the president of Arte, who wrote 2 very nice books on this kind of the civilization of the golden fish. And then the recent one that just came out is Storm in the Bocal, how we are completely now overwhelmed by this invasion of the digital age. So that's a real challenge. You know, we know that violent content do translate into more violent behavior now and in the years to come. That has been shown again and again with video games. We know that very young children who have a lot of time with screens, they are really more close into themselves. There's less communication with others. It's less easy for them to go into a face-to-face conversation, for instance. So that's a real challenge. I don't know how we will tackle that because right now it's exponential growth. So I don't know how to address that, but it's something that we really need to think about if we think of the fate of future generation. And the fact, for instance, I read a study that children play 10 times less together, say in the street or outside, than 30 years ago. That means what? Because they sit at home on front of screens. That's why they go less out and play together and whatever they do. I was in the countryside looking at some cherries last spring. And I said, when I was young, we would climb trees and to get the cherry. And the farmer said, well, now children don't climb trees. I went, wow. So you see, that's the problem. There's also a study in the Lancet that showed that children who are disconnected from nature, children that grow exclusively in cities, the risk of depression and schizophrenia in later life, the risk is increased by 15%. That doesn't mean that 50% of children will get depressed, but whatever risk of a child to become depressed in later life, that particular risk will be increased 15%, which is significant. So all that is certainly worrying. I don't have the magic bullet to propose, but I think that some of the reaction of young children to care more for the environment, not to live a more simple life, to reconnect with nature, whether that trend will be strong enough, facing the onslaught of the screens and digital technology is so invasive, I don't know. Right now, the tendency is a bit gloomy.
Yeah, I don't want to end on a gloomy note, so let me ask you one more point. There is, for me, a fantastic poem that could be nearly my own private program, but maybe it could be many more people program. T.S. Eliot was writing, where's the life we've lost in living? Where's the wisdom we've lost in knowledge? And where's the knowledge we've lost in information? I think if he was here today, he might say, where's the information we are losing in data? And so my personal program would be, can we reverse this poem? Can we go from data to information, to knowledge, to wisdom, and to meaningful lives? You know, how can we reverse this? Can we, I mean, we've got lots of technology for data, a lot for information, not much for knowledge, and nothing for wisdom. And so, you know, what would be a Socratic technology, or a Confucian technology, or a Buddhist technology? I don't know, but you know, maybe you can come up with some ideas, or maybe we can invite the next generation to propose a deep understanding of those ancient traditions. You know, for instance, tradition of Ubuntu is an amazing one. If we take Africa, okay, there is wisdom in every ancient tradition, everywhere. can we go back to these traditions? Can we have the children maybe interview their grandparents or the wisest people around them? Because Confucius was saying there's 3 ways to reach wisdom. The first one was to make mistake, but to learn from your mistake. The second one was to think deeply about issues, which I think what's a lot of meditation strategy are around this issue. And the third one was to listen to the wisest people around you. But Confucius never told you how to identify the wisest people around you. And anyone pretending to be the wisest people around you is not the wisest people around you. So, how can we, identify the best sources of wisdom? Can we sort of crowdsource them? Can we start sharing them? Can we start adapting them to, the 21st century, to the new generations? Can we design new technologies? Because to some extent, artificial intelligence is very far from artificial wisdom. First, it will be hard to define, but, if we have ever more powerful machines, if they are, even more stupid than we are in their use of their intelligence, we'll be in trouble. So, can we have a deep program of research all over the world with all generations going to try to address some of these questions?
Well, first of all, we must distinguish intelligence, whether artificial or not, and consciousness and being. And second, we must distinguish information, like now big data, and wisdom. Because you see, people who did 9/11, they were extremely intelligent. I mean, to devise that and to hijack all those planes with just a few razor blades and planning, very smart. But the motivation was so destructive and negative. So intelligence is just a tool, can be used for build or for destroy. So now the human values are quite different. It's what do you do with your intelligence? What is the motivation? Intelligence is ethically neutral, just like power, just like money. It depends what you do with it. So that's why you need the values. I mean, compassion, consideration of others, altruism, and so forth. Those are not neutral. They are meant to benefit others. And then wisdom is different than information. Big data just give you a lot of information. It doesn't tell you, what makes a good life, what makes a good person, what makes a good citizen, what makes a good world, what makes an ethical world. So it is very different. So this, in that sense, intelligence and information will never replace wisdom, which is to reflect how to become a good human being, how to thrive oneself and contribute to the well-being of others and to eradicating suffering as much as we can. So that's, I think, very different. And it's also one important point of wisdom that sometimes we forget is wisdom is to be in adequation with reality. The opposite of wisdom is distortion of reality. For instance, if we think that we are independent entities, that we are sort of permanent and so forth, we are at odds with reality. So it's going to be dysfunctional if we think that we can build our happiness in our little corner. It's not going to work. So it's a wrong worldview. So it's the opposite of wisdom. It's distortion of reality that is interdependent, that is dynamic, that is made of not of separate entities that interact, but of a web of intimately related human beings and other species and the environment. So to have a correct view of the nature of reality, the nature of mind, how the mind works, it's not just information, it's a kind of way of seeing things in harmony with reality. And one of the Buddhist principles is to bridge the gap between appearance, the way things appear and the way they are. That's very important. That's part of wisdom. To end on the positive note, as you said, there's one concept I think that's quite powerful for young people, is the idea of wonderment. Like it would be wonderment toward the beauty of nature. When you are in front of a beautiful natural landscape, a sense of wonder, of awe. Wow, so beautiful. When you see, a serene old woman or man, or the smile of an innocent child, you're in a state of wonderment. When you witness an action of incredible generosity and kindness, there's a sense of awe, of wonderment. So now, wonderment, if you are in wonder, because of the beauty of nature or other animals, the biophilia, the tendency we have to love nature and love other species. Wonderment if you are in awe, you will want to take care, you want to respect, you don't want to destroy what causes you wonderment. So if you say, wow, so beautiful this forest, so beautiful those animals, you don't want to destroy them. So it needs to the notion of respect. The notion of respect naturally needs to the notion of taking care. Now, taking care leads to action. So I think, there's so many terrible news about the degradation of the environment. There's more than what we can digest, and it's getting worse and worse. All the tipping points are adding to each other. So really, it's going to be possibly nightmarish. But we need something constructive to inspire us to act for the environment. And I think wonderment is one of them. So I think this is a concept that is quite dear to me. It's émerveillement in French. I did a photo book just to show the beauty of nature and try to muse on those concepts. Yeah,
I love it. I think it's beautiful, and I think we should be sharing those moments of wonder and awe. Actually, I don't know if you know this research, but it's been shown that when you're invited not just to go in nature, but to wander and be in this state of wonderment and awe that you're describing, it's even better for your health. So going in nature is good for your health, but going with the state of mind of appreciating the awe-inspiring moments that you go through is even better for your own health. So I think this taking care of oneself, others, and the planet should include this awe walks.
And when I was researching on wonderment, there's a friend of mine called Dacher Kaltner who studies human goodness at the University of California. And they did a study that wonderment increased altruism. So I was so happy because you see, when you're in wonder in front of nature or other people, it's bigger than yourself. So in a way, you become more aware of interdependence, something bigger than my own little ego. And so there's less sense of self-centeredness, more openness to others, and more altruistic behavior. So it's a very interesting and positive concept.
I think that's a wonderful way of finishing this amazingly inspiring discussion from my side, at least. And I'm sure for many people that will be listening to this video. Thank you so much, Matthieu. Ok, so je me suis pas préparé du tout, Matthieu, donc on coupe.
Moi non plus.
Mais, donc
je ne prépare jamais, je suis trop vieux.
On va improviser et je suis sûr que ça se passera très bien.